So first we'll go who's Cadence and what do they do, brief overview. Then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the demo, and that's what you guys are here for. End-to-end records management in M365. Then we have some Purview and dispositioning tips, and then we'll tease our next webinar coming up in our webinar series. So speaking today, we have Jordan Uytterhagen, Managing Director of Cadence Solutions. Jordan is a recognized digital transformation leader and has extensive experience assisting organizations with automation of ECM systems, electronic records management, workflow, and complex system integrations across numerous platforms, including Microsoft, which we're talking about today, OpenText, and SAP. So thank you everybody for listening to my ramblings. Jordan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jared. Just give me a mic check there, please.
You're good to go.
Excellent. I'll flip my camera on briefly as well. So hi, I'm Jordan. I'm the Managing Director here at Cadence, and I'll be doing the demo today on M365 and records management. So a bit about Cadence and more so myself and how everything kind of got started here. I like to tell this story because I think it resonates really well with probably folks that are looking to embark on some kind of project or do something in the records management space. I started on the customer side of the table. I was an employee at my local municipality, which was a county. We hired a very large organization, I call them a big logo organization, to deliver a records management project, and they utterly failed for us. So in the end, we spent about $300,000 in 3 months. Our mandate was to go live with a records management system and a retention schedule, a larger ECM system, migrate the data in. And we basically had nothing after 3 months, but we paid them to fly across the country a bunch of times and have beer in our fine county and city. So after going through that, what we did at the municipality is we actually fired that vendor, which is pretty hard to do in a municipality. To terminate any vendor contract, very difficult. We terminated that contract, did the project internally ourselves, and they kind of looked around and thought, well, if this is the benchmark in the industry, I'm going to go create a company that does it a little differently. And that's what Cadence Solutions is all about. So founded Cadence about 9 years ago, coming up on 10 soon, and we've delivered over 78 ECM and EDRMS projects in the industry, with different verticals. So municipal, of course, with some of the background there, private industry, so financial services, insurance, energy, and utilities is big as well in this space with the regulatory requirements. I took a peek at the attendee list. Looks like we have a few of honestly, our first customers on the call here looking at some of this as well. So good to see them dialing in again. A bit about the company just in general, been around since 2013. We're involved with two major, of course, ECM players. Microsoft, we're in the Content Services Partner Program, and we're also involved with OpenText as well. So we've done a number of different projects. We've been delivering remotely for all 9 years. So COVID really didn't impact our ability to make sure our customers were happy. I'll go through some of the demonstration scenarios here. So today we're going to go through basically an overview of the Compliance Center, now called Purview. So if you're doing your Googling and your research on it, you're going to have dual terms. So that's always fun. I'm going to go through the creation of a retention label. And what I find really resonates the most with records managers or anybody trying to, kind of prove this out, is this really going to work for me, is we have to go from start to finish in a quick demonstration to build that comfort level with the technology. So we're going to create a retention label. After we create that retention label, we're going to go through and publish it. A bit of a cooking show thing I'll show you there, where it does take a while to publish, so we do have some pre-published ones. We're going to take a published label and we're going to apply it to a document. Essentially, we're going to make it a record. After we do that, we're going to go through and perform a disposition review on that as well. So we can go through and actually push some through. We have some pre-cooked already that will go through disposition review and destruction. We'll log in as a couple different users to show that we can actually march that record towards destruction within the system. So just for an overview here, there's no third-party modules installed here. That's one of our kind of tricks of the trade here with us doing implementations in M365. It's starting to gain quite a bit of traction as we're involved with the product management side with the Microsoft Purview team there. So I'm just going to exit the slide deck quickly, jump over into the demonstration side of things. Jared, if you can give me a quick thumbs up or verbal on being able to see this.
Yep, you're good to go.
Excellent. So one of the opening questions I just want to ask, because there is licensing dependency, of course, with Microsoft and everything that can be done, out of the box and different licensing levels, is I'm going to just push a quick poll out through Teams here, and you should see a question about what level of licensing do you currently have in place in your organization. This is always an interesting question because, sometimes records folks, they don't know and they're not really paid to know. But it does help in terms of crafting the solution and doing some of the more automated functions and easing the user the change management side on the users. So leave that poll run for a little bit. If you want to see the results, they should show when we close the poll. That'll show up in the chat side of things.
Yeah, if anyone wants to, they can open chat right now and they can see the results kind of flowing through live, which is kind of cool.
I'll just click close on that. I'm just going to cheat and just drag it on the screen share here. So 50% have E5. That's good news if you want to do any automated records management. E3 is more of the manual style, and then I have no idea, which we did expect quite a few of. Only 38%, so not too bad. So what I'm going to show today is based on E5. Really, the difference between E3 and E5 is the words manual versus automated on a lot of things. There's a bunch of different licensing in there, of course, non-records related, Power BI, Teams phone calling, that kind of thing. But generally, if you're going to go through and do end-to-end records management out of the box, you're going to want to look at E5. We do have an article on our website that kind of says the benefits of E3 versus E5 and some of the differentiators specific to the IM and RM space. So feel free to check that out, and maybe we'll put a link in the chat for that a little bit later, Jared. So as they roll into the Compliance Center, now called Purview, you're going to see at the top here, it's still the URL, it's still compliance. So even though they've rebranded everything Purview, except this button here in the Compliance Center, so you do have that dual branding going on in the Microsoft side of things, both in documentation and in the usage of the system. So as we're in the Compliance Center, there's a number of different permissions here, and I have some tips at the end that I'll touch on. Even though you're the global administrator, you're not going to have some of the permissions into the dispositioning side of things. That's something to keep in mind. So that's good for the IT folks. If they are running the actual whole tenant, they shouldn't see all the records inside of it. That is enforced, but is a setting that can be changed as well. Inside of here, I'm in the records management section. These are a bit in flux. They change every few months within the Purview or the Compliance Center area. We're going to go through and create a label underneath the file plan. So if you've seen this before, maybe just hit the React button there or a show of hands in terms of if you've seen Compliance Center, if you've created a label. I'm not sure if this is net new to people. So if you've seen it before, just hit your show of hands. We just like to take a quick look on that. Looks like we got a few hands up. That's not too bad. Inside of here, one of the tricks is to create all your labels in advance when you need them, because it does take time to publish. So we're going to go through and create a label and walk through some of the different functions here. So we'll just lazily call this webinar label. Looks like we've done that one before. And we can put in a description for users to see. We don't want to put in any citations or anything in depth that they're frankly going to ignore, and any admins that they want to see as well. We can go through and put in our reference ID, anything else we need in that kind of thing. Underneath the reference side of things, we can put this in and say this is for policies. We can pick our business function and department if we like, and we can preload these in. We'll say we're doing something for operations. These are categories as well. So maybe the other record systems out there usually have that hierarchy, right? You're building that tree. This is a way of somewhat building that tree, but in a different way. You're not actually seeing the tree as you build it, and you're not going to level 3 to create your next label or classification. You're building it kind of by picking through these boxes and potentially even choosing subcategories if you have any configured for that as well. We can add the authority type. So we can say, is this a regulatory? Is it a business reason? Is it a legal reason? We'll say it's a business reason right now for operations. We can choose any citations we like. Let's say we're doing something with the FTC. And we could simply navigate forward. Now is where you start to get into some of the more, I guess, forks in the road in terms of the M365 records area. So again, we can retain items for a specific period of time. They can be labeled, and they can't be permanently deleted. We can define how long that is. We can also enforce actions after a period of time. So they're not retained, meaning, I guess by definition, they're technically not records, because they can be removed. And you can decide what to do later with them. So pure procrastination on this step. Or we can just label items. So we just want to classify items and label them. They're not going to be retained, and they're not really restricted in any way with your users editing, moving, or deleting them. So to me, I don't really find any value in that feature. If we're going to look at labeling an item because of its location, I would much rather go with labeling the item due to its content sensitivity. So if we do have PII in a record, there's other ways of doing that through the sensitivity label side of things, as opposed to the record label side of things. And that's really what starts to set M365 apart from the other record systems. So right now we're going to go through and we're going to retain the item for a specific period of time. I love how the example of 7 years, the exact retention that records managers do not like. We're going to change this to a custom duration, and we're just going to set it to 2 days. We get to choose when to start the retention period. So we can start the retention period when the items were created. We can start the retention period.
Notice, Jordan, that's 7 years and 2 days.
There we go. Thank you, Jared.
Yeah.
We can choose an event type that we've created in the system as well. So the 3 you're going to see in your system right out of the box are when were they created, when were they last modified, and when were they labeled. So these work sometimes, I'd say, but in reality, we're usually looking for that closure criteria and that end date on the life cycle, or the starting the clock on the life cycle of the record based on something. In contracts, it's contract completion date. On employees, maybe termination or retirement date or date they left. There's a number of different events you can build out here to do the case closure of records. We've given that webinar previously. I think that was a couple months back. It is available on our website if you do want to see the case closure of records side executing. It's not as in-depth on the label side of things, but it is more of an execution-based demo. So we're just going to pick when the items were created, and we're going to move forward one screen. Now we get to determine what do we do next. Are we able to edit and change items, basically retain them even if a user deletes them, and it keeps a secure, it keeps a copy even if the user hits delete. So to the user it's deleted, but to the organization and the governance team it's not. It's kept in a secure location, and at that point it goes forward and we get to purge it out of that location. If we do just simply want to mark items as records, so users won't be able to edit or delete the items, only admins can do things. For SharePoint and OneDrive files, actions are blocked or based or changed based on that status. So if we mark them as records, maybe we want to disable sharing. Maybe we don't want these other things to happen. If we're using Flow, maybe we want to pick those records up and move them to an archive location as well. So a number of different options, again, that fork in the road. So you have to determine at that point what you're going to do. After we've hit the retention period, so in our instance, 2 days, what do we want to do? So we can delete the items automatically, just get rid of them. We don't want anybody's approval, they're gone. So let's say that's transitory, we have 2 days. If we're starting a disposition review, we can configure that here. So if we're going to start the disposition review, we want to assign people into that review, and then they get to approve it. Usually we're rolling that up through a department, through a director or a records representative in that department, and then the director, before somebody's allowed to hit the destroy button, records management. I'll configure that one in a second. We can also change the label now. So we can go through staged retention inside of M365. So we want to do active for 2 years. Maybe after 2 years, we want to flip everything that was not a PDFA into a PDFA and change that label. So we can run the retention for 2 years, then change the label to run maybe an inactive archiving retention, perform some cleanup functions, maybe remove previous versions, maybe PDFA the documents to harden them for the future, and change the label on that. Because we have this feature now, it gives us a hook to go into M365, into SharePoint, into OneDrive, and start to pull content and really move that around as we see fit. You're truly the puppet master of the content, because you can change the label at the end of one period. So you can stitch period 1, retention 1 to retention 2 to retention 3, and keep linking them until you hit the end of the life cycle the way you'd like. The traditional ECM systems did a very, very good job of this, and this was a gap in M365 until recently. So this is a big, big feature addition. We can also deactivate the retention settings if we like. So they're not retained or deleted. Basically, they're locked for a period of time and then they're unlocked. So not the greatest of best practices. I'm going to go through and create a stage here, and we're going to go through a 2-level approval on this. So we get to create a stage, and we're going to call the first stage Records Rep Approval. So we're going to go to the department, and we're going to send this to Lee for approval. And we're going to add another stage after that. Pick Lee from our list. We're going to add another stage for director approval. And we're going to set that to Adele. So we got to go to Lee first, then we're going to go to Adele. You can also use groups here, of course. So if you want to go to a group of directors, or you have a records management committee or records representatives or champions in each department, it can go to that. You can add up to 5 stages. If you have 5, quite a few. We can also start to connect this into Flow, Microsoft's automation and workflow tool that comes in 365 to do more advanced features and functions. You can see we have our disposition review now setting up. We have that 2-day retention, of course. After 2 days, it's going to go to Lee, then it's going to go to Adele, and then we're going to have the option of Adele hitting the destroy button on that content. I'll click next. This is the summary of the actual label that's going to be created. We're going to create that label. And now we get to choose where we publish this label. I'm just going to do nothing here to show you what happens, and I'll go and publish this in a second as well. We'll go back to our file plan. We called our label Friday label. We'll do a search for that. We can see it's inactive. And if we check this box, we're looking to publish the label. As I go to publish the label, we can see we have our 2 days keep and review and then delete. So that's our progression. We can choose static or adaptive. We're going to go with static. So we're going to choose the location we want the content to retain. If the location changes after this policy is created, we do need to do the update. We're going to pick specific locations just so you can see all the features here. So we can choose to put this in Exchange email. We can choose to do this in SharePoint sites, OneDrive, and or M365 groups, and then the specific sites or accounts or groups. So let's use a wild example. We have our C-level executives, right? Maybe we want to put a different records retention on their Exchange email, something that's different than everybody else. We've frequently got into sparring battles with C-levels on I want my email forever, of course. So we're just going to apply this to SharePoint, and the reason I want to do that is it actually publishes faster. We name our policy. And this piece here, it's going to take up to 1 day for labels to appear to your users. If we're doing this in Outlook, an Outlook web app, you're going to need to see at least 10 megs of data, and this will publish out. What I've found is that if you run this just on the SharePoint side of things, it will publish within 5 to 10 minutes. It's very quick, as opposed to if you're pushing it through OneDrive, through Outlook, through M365 groups, there's a lot more back-end work that needs to be done by Microsoft. But we're going to push that through. It's published. We can go through, do anything else we like, apply a label, create a different thing. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through and actually put this onto some content inside of a SharePoint site. We're going to jump over to a SharePoint site. We're going to drag in a new document. We're going to see it's not too happy when we drag that in. We'll just do a refresh here. And our document brought in was corp document. We have required info that needs to be filled in. So because we're in the contract management area, there's a few metadata fields that are required. So we need to specify the manager. We need to put in a project manager. We pick a start date. What we're really looking for is the label. Now it's not quite available here. But these are all our labels that are already published. So you have a whole bunch of them here. I'm going to go with J29. That's the one that I created a little bit earlier this morning. And we now have a label we've published. This one was published July 29th on this document that resides in a SharePoint site. We can also do that automatically. If you have E5, anything we drop into a library, we can automatically tag with a label. That also works in document sets. So that's a way of doing that. If we're looking at doing a case closure on a document, you can set that up based on a metadata field changing. So we can say after the end date or after the contract status is set to completed, let's now attach a label to it as well. That really, again, takes the onus of labeling off of the user and puts it back onto the system. Much, much better user experience and a much more accurate record system. I'm going to jump into the dispositioning side. Under the dispositioning side, we're still in that same user. We're actually in as Adam in the system right now. We can go and see that in our major incident label or classification, we have 27 documents. I'm just going to pop this out to show you what this looks like from this side of things. We have all these documents and records that are up for disposition. They're both from SharePoint and OneDrive. You can see the location of the items here. We'll just expand this. We can see the author, Adele, Adam. We have some invoices. We have some SharePoint notes. A bunch of different things. What we can do is one of the parts of our review was to send this over to Lee. So I'm just going to jump screens. You can see now we're logged in as Lee. Lee was given an email, well, multiple emails that essentially there's records to review, and it was 28. We've got rid of 1. So Lee's going to get this email. You have dispositions that are ready for you. Please proceed and do that. So the nagging portion of your position as a records manager, if that's your position, is completed for you by the system. Lee, please go ahead and do this. On the disposition side for Lee, just pop this out to a new window. He's going to see the same thing. I'm going to pick SharePoint notes for now and show you a bit of an example. I have some tips and tricks on this in a second as well. So if we click on the actual file name, if you check the box, it doesn't work, but if you click on the file name, you're going to see the preview of the document here, the document viewer portion of it. So if you really want to take a look at what's going on in the document, you can do that by clicking on the name, the title of the document. The checkbox will not do it. Lee's got a number of different actions he can perform. He can approve the disposal. He's last man up here. We can go through and relabel. If we give him the appropriate permissions to do that, he can relabel this record. So I no longer want this under major incident. I want this under something else. You can extend. So if we know there's going to be any discovery happening, maybe it's mislabeled, maybe he needs to wait till the boss is back before he can hit the destroy button, and he wants to do that, we can give them the option to extend. Now, I'd say it's a dangerous feature in terms of who you give the option to that, because they can just procrastinate, which is really what they want to do when they're doing something on a Friday. You can optionally add more reviewers as well. So we can add a second, third, fourth opinion on this if we want to extend the review cycle out to more individuals. Refreshing the list, nothing fancy there. And we can also export this. So I know we've set up some record systems in the past, but old habits die hard, or reviewers in the process that are not used to reviewing records and approving disposition want something different. You know, put it in front of me on my desk on paper, or email me an extract and I'll just look at it and say, yeah, get rid of all that stuff. So you can actually download and export this list and do it the old school way. So this is what the export looks like. It's an Excel sheet. We have the location, the author, the title or subject, essentially, of the record, the type, so the file extension, the tag name or label applied, major incident, when was it applied, what was the destruction date here, the expiration date, and what stage are we at in the approval cycle. So this is a handy thing if your users and your user community or your process dictates that I don't want to have everybody going into the compliance center and pressing the button, and you do want to do it this way, there is the extract option from within the compliance center in Purview to be able to do that. In this instance, we're going to go through and dispose of the SharePoint's notes document and record. And that item is now disposed. Jumping back to our other user, we're going to go take a look at the label we created. And it is published now. You'll see it right here. We've published that label. Any changes we want to make? Let's say you go back and you're like, well, I'd actually like to apply this on OneDrive accounts now as well. We can update that label, resubmit, and it will republish. So I'm going to jump over into a slide deck and cover some of the tips and tricks on what we've went through and some of the, I guess, pitfalls or things we call them gotchas that you should be looking for in the records management side of 365. So as I mentioned earlier, by default, a global admin isn't granted the disposition management role. So if you're a global admin and you're playing around in a test environment or a development environment and you don't see some of the things you saw today, shoot us an email. We'll give you a hand, of course. But make note that the global admin isn't granted the disposition management role. So that's something you want to check inside of your security. Another thing is the disposition reviewer. If you want to go and perform kind of what we showed today, you want to create a custom group without permissions to view and configure other features for retention and records management. We don't want to give a user access to be able to change the records management functionality. We just want them to be able to go through and do disposition review. So if your end goal or objective is to do disposition review inside of the compliance center, just like we showed under going through the pending dispositions and disposed items area here, you want to make sure that you have everything set up security-wise for the custom group to only perform that role without giving them essentially change functions within Purview in the compliance center. By default, each person that accesses the disposition page sees only the items they're assigned to review. So if I'm inside of a larger, folder or doc library, I'm a part of a department, I'm given 50 to review, Jared's given 100 to review. He's only going to see his 100, I'm only going to see my 50. I'm not going to see his, even though maybe I had permissions to those documents and records in the library, I'm not a part of the review side of things. The viewing disposition content, so there's a group called Content Explorer, Content Viewer, kind of a mouthful. But to view the contents of items during the disposition process, users need to be added to that roller group, and I'll show you what it looks like with that and without that. So with that access, you're going to see exactly what we saw earlier. When you click on the name of a file, it shows you the preview of the actual image inside of the document, so the document viewer look, and that's when everything's set up correctly. Where users get frustrated, one of the pitfalls is if they don't have that permission, they can still select everything and do a dispose, but essentially it's all blind. If they do want to see the content of the document and record itself, you need to make sure that they're in this role group. This is what they're going to see if they do not have that. They're just going to see error, access denied. They're probably going to get cold feet at that point and not do anything. So run this through on your testing if you're doing that. If you need help, again, reach out. We can help you out with that. One of the things that we do offer here is to come in and set up the foundation of M365. I know there's quite a few records managers that want to, take it from there and maintain and modify the retention schedule, but that, jumpstart getting started into a new tenant environment can be a little difficult. So we come to the table with a foundational offering. We'll set up Compliance Center and Purview based on the best practices. We'll configure that retention schedule for you and train you on how to maintain that going forward. We'll configure some sensitivity labels, which we didn't show today, but if you don't know what those are, it's the ability to recognize patterns in documents and flag them with PII or any kind of sensitive information. That can be asset numbers, that can be social security or social insurance numbers, driver's license numbers, credit card numbers, and automatically flag that document and record with a label. Part of this as well is training. We don't want to be the face of the system forever. We want to train you on maintaining the file plan, doing the dispositioning with reviewers, performing e-discovery and doing some of those legal holds. And again, that data loss prevention is a really big benefit to the organization from a governance perspective, not just a retention perspective. So I'll maybe open it up to questions right now. If there's any questions, and then we got a few wrap-up slides after that. We're running maybe a touch early today, so I'll open it up for questions. So I see the one on, can I open the full document, not just a preview? Let me just grab that for you, and I'll show that in a second. Get that set up here. So Emily's question, I'll answer Brandon's in a second as I'm just clicking through here to get the disposition in the full side of things. So short answer for you, Brandon, is yes. There's the 2-directional arrow that will actually pop the preview pane into a full window. Just hit share. To show that. So right from here, if you're seeing the preview, 2 arrows to maximize, separate window. This is a 1-page document, so you're seeing the first page, the only page. But that's how you can see the full document. Barry, can this be used to manage the retention and disposition of records in place in other line of business systems? It depends. Easiest answer, of course, in technology. There is the ability to go into the messaging app side of things now. So they're working on Slack, Slack's enabled, and they're working on WhatsApp. So both of those are available if we're looking at going into those. If we're looking at true line of business, we could configure that with an API. We'd essentially have to pull out a link to the document of record in the line of business system. Let's say it's an insurance system, it's a policy document that lives in that system. Create a stub in the compliance center to run it through the official cycle, and then go and purge the document out of the line of business system. So short answer is you're using Compliance Center as your records engine, but it's really processing shortcuts and communicating back likely through Microsoft Flow to do that. Emily's question, is there a way to change the designated project leads or project team members need approval chains? If so, is it manual or is there some sort of global push setting? So how we would do that typically, Emily, is we put the users in groups and the groups go on the review cycle. So as you have turnover or project lead changeover on specific labels, the group management side is essentially what runs through it. So that would end up being essentially turns into an IT function. Are the right people in the right place group-wise? And then that actually flows down into the record side of things. And that's more of a best practice, almost irrelevant of the record software, but how we like to do the disposition reviews on our projects. To Dylan's question, you got a few there, Dylan. Are disposition certificates created when it's executed? We have one we can create, meaning Cadence does, not M365. So yes, but not out of the box. Can the content of the disposition notification emails be configured? I believe it can. We have not modified that at this point. And can the list be sorted, filtered, and searched within the disposition review? For example, when you have 10,000 items to review, how do you search for things you might want to relabel or address things differently? That one, if I was going to go into that, where Microsoft's really going with that, so we can filter here if we like, but I really don't think that's going to give you a whole bunch of ability if you're looking at the volume of, say, 10,000 items you're going to review. I would start looking at Power BI integrating with the Compliance Center to pull that out in a different fashion. So you get more of a visual way as opposed to, you know, this screen here where we're simply kind of playing in a larger list view. That would be my 5-second advice on that one before diving in deeper. I see there's a question here. Do all users need to have E5 license in order for the E5 components to work across the repository? Do users who do not have permissions and powers in Compliance Center, but are general users work on documents require the E5 license? So technically, no. There is an add-on called the Compliance add-on. I think it's something like $7 a month. For users. So if you have a bunch of users that are, not typically at a desk, you can have them get that as an add-on license and up your E3 to almost like an E3 plus records style licensing that can accomplish that functionality. The main benefit of E5 is the automation side of applying that label on content. That's the benefit of it. Ellen, is it possible to change the retention labels after it's been implemented to declared records? Yes, we can always change that. If it requires scripting, that's okay as well. But you can change that. If we're locking the record and it's immutable, then you have to unlock it and then reapply.
I see Emma has her hand up there. Do you have a question? Or
yeah, if you don't mind, I actually wanted to clarify. My question was about the E5 licenses, and I don't think I worded it very well. So what I'm trying to get at is if we wanted to use the automated aspect of it and that workflow aspect, regardless of whether we did it through the add-on or had a full E5 license, do the end users who aren't part of that automated process, they're not part of disposition reviews or anything like that, need to also have it in order for those retention labels to be applied and those policies to be applied to their content? Please tell me if that didn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I understand it now, Emma. So we asked that exact same question as more of a, we'll say, licensing skirting question in a way. Like, do we need to buy 10,000 E5 licenses if we have 10,000 PC users? Their response was, even though technically it may work, you're out of licensing compliance.
Okay.
So that's what we've been told. I don't have that in writing.
No,
If anybody gets that in writing, by all means, send that over, because that is a question we get on almost every single demonstration right now is how many of these do I need because they're expensive.
Okay, thank you so much.
So Peter's got a question. Can you apply a retention label to an entire folder so all documents placed in that folder automatically have the retention label? Absolutely. So with E5, let me just jump into a procurement example here. We've done it with doc sets as well. So everything in, this is a contract example. Let's say we have the gobstopper contract. Everything that goes into this doc set, which is in this folder, which is in the contract management library, ends up as a retention label of statement of work. So that's the beauty of not having the user do it, is it's going to be done right, and it can be done automatically by the system itself. All right, doesn't look like there's any more in the chat there. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to push one more poll, kind of based on the next session that everyone would like to see. So
we might have got a couple. Hey, sorry, Jordan. Sorry to interrupt you. It's my job. We might have got a couple more questions in the chat there, just as you were ending that last sentence.
Okay. Give me 1 second to go through this, and then I'll jump back over to that. So our next webinar is going to be on August 30th, and we're going to go through the e-discovery side, so kind of continuing that records journey in its life cycle, and go through the e-discovery side, basically legal holds, disclosure within 365. So this, to me, was one of the biggest, we'll say, conversion moments for me to get on board with what M365 can do. So I think you guys would really get a lot of value out of that if you got something out of this one today. The poll question I pushed as well is what's important to you folks in terms of attending these kind of things. We're trying to create a bit of a user community, not have it overly salesy, and show off some of the functionality and features in there. Things we get requested for all the time are automating accounts payable, contract management, human resources, more info and sensitivity labels. So those are some of the ones that we just want to know how to schedule the remainder of 2022 in terms of webinars and what everybody's interested in. If you do want to register for the next one, that QR code you see on the screen is for that. And I think, Jared, you can paste in the Teams link there for the registration page as well.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Looks like we guessed right. E-discovery seems to be leading the polling, so. Jump back into questions. I want to clarify, so this is from Jing Fernandez. I just want to clarify the area where we talk about files in the active phase. Is this set up as a part of the records management control, or is this controlled by the author? So this would be typically a part of the records management control. If you want to go from like active to inactive to archive or whatever your records lifecycle is, that's where we can actually put that in there. And because you can link one label to another, you can daisy chain those all together to get to the desired result. So Jared's put that link in there as well for the next one. Just to wrap up a bit with us, connect with us online. We're big on LinkedIn in terms of showing off different features, functions, micro content on there as well. So tips and tricks and blogs that we post every month. You can reach out to me via email. I'm jordan@cadensolutions.ca, or book a meeting. Our website's there as well. If you'd like to view other and past webinars, they're all there. No registration required. You can just go in there and take a look around at some of the features. And by all means, register for the next webinar coming up.